Amanda will share her experiences as a Mercy volunteer and details about her spiritual journey. Amanda, can you introduce yourself? Tell us where you're from, where did you serve, what you're currently up to, and what you do for work.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. My name's Amanda. I grew up in the Chicago suburbs, Aurora, Illinois, if anyone's from the area. I served in MVC in 2019, 2020, and I was in Philadelphia at Project Home, working in homeless services. And after I finished my year with the Mercy Volunteer Corps, I moved to Boston to start a graduate program. I'm in a dual master's program, getting a master's in social work and a master's in theology and ministry. And about a year ago, I transitioned from a full-time grad student to a full-time employee, part-time grad student. So I work at the Boston College School of Theology and Ministry in their admissions office, and I'm finishing up my master's degrees and will hopefully graduate next May.
That's great. Thanks for sharing a little bit about yourself. So before going into the service year, what was your motivation behind choosing our program that included the commitment to personal and spiritual growth?
Yeah, so I knew going into undergraduate that my end goal was to be in some sort of social services career. I thought that I really wanted to be a therapist. And when I was approaching the end of my bachelor's, you need some sort of master's degree to do therapy. And I wasn't totally sure like what kind of degree I wanted to do. So I was really looking for some kind of like professional experience where I'd get to learn the work and like make more certain of what I wanted to do. But I was like, I don't necessarily want to go straight into the workforce. And so when someone kind of mentioned service programs to me, I was like, this sounds amazing. A year dedicated to all these different areas of growth, because I wanted a career in social services, but it was very much like because of my faith. I was like, this is the type of career I want because it's what my faith is calling me to. So to be in an intentional community where I was learning about a potential career path, but also devoting time to learning more about my spirituality and more about not only the career I wanted to have, but the type of life I wanted to lead and how my faith and my work and all of those different pieces fit together. I was like, wow, this is perfect. This is everything I'm looking for. And I will have an automatic built-in community of people who are asking the same questions, wanting to find out the same things. So it just felt like a very natural step to go from my undergraduate to a year of service.
So you mentioned that, you kind of went into this with your community, or I guess with like-minded people who wanted to go along this spiritual journey. Can you talk more about what you did specifically during your service year with your community for this either spiritual practice or community growth?
Absolutely. So my community's like theme for our entire year was really intentionality. And we kind of fed that into all of the different aspects of our life. So one of the things, right, that MVC encourages is weekly spirituality nights as a community. That was something that we were very dedicated to. We were very excited when it was our turn to lead, because every 3 weeks would be my turn. And so I'd spend my 3 weeks like looking forward to when it was my turn to lead spirituality night. So that very much was a part of our routine, was taking the time to explore a different area of spirituality each week. And it really looked different depending on, the season and what each of us was really up to in that moment. We did more, I would say, like traditional things like rosary nights or going to a mass together, but we also did things like go on hikes, body scans, meditation, like all kinds of whatever really was being stirred up. We took time at least once a week to do that. But it was also, I think, one of the most like fruitful and meaningful parts of my year that really has continued to influence like my spirituality and my understanding of what it means to be in a community of faith, is that it was important for us to spend time together. So we ate dinner together every night, we cooked together every night, we washed the dishes together every night. There was a lot of talking. There was a lot of putting the phones away and dedicating a couple hours of time to checking in, not only about like how the day was going and what was up at our service sites, but like what's coming up for you? Like what questions is this year spurring? Like what is on your mind? So it was a lot of being where your feet were and really taking the time to appreciate the gift of having each other in our lives for this season. And I learned a lot about what it means to be in community and what it means to grow together just from prioritizing talking to each other and being with each other.
That's great. And so as you move through your year together and we're winding down, what is something that you learned from your service year that you kind of take with you now that you use in your everyday life?
There's so many things. I've been out of MVC for 3 years now, and I feel like I'm still unpacking like all the different ways that it's impacted my life. But I think one of the ways that it really changed like the way that I interact in general is just the intentionality of saying something and meaning it. So like if Mary Kate told me that we were going to get coffee on Saturday, like that meant that we were going to get coffee on Saturday. So like when I'm meeting people or catching up with friends and like I say, like, let's catch up, like let's put something on the calendar. That's not like a passing like platitude to be like, oh yeah, like that's what you say to people. Like if I say that, like then we're going to do something and we're going to find time and I'm going to prioritize continuing that connection. So that's one thing that I think really changed. But another thing is also just, I think being in community really expanded my understanding of what spiritual practices are. It's not just like sitting down to say a rosary. It's not just reading the Bible. It's anything really that moves you and brings you closer to God and to creation. So I think creativity and like a willingness to explore different things was something that I really learned from my MVC, or being open to what possibilities there are.
I know earlier you mentioned that maybe all of you are a bit more traditional in your spirituality, but as people may know, we accept volunteers of all or no faiths. So during your interactions with maybe other volunteers or your community members, maybe in Philadelphia, kind of practicing that active listening and flexibility, what is one thing that maybe was different that you changed during the course of your journey?
Yeah, I think my community, we were 3 people and we were all we all identified as Catholic but came from very different backgrounds. And so just learning more about their journey and what that looked like. So something that a practice that one of my community members introduced me to was praying with poetry. She loved just all sorts of poetry, and I had never considered like using that as a tool to be more in tune with like where I am and what I'm feeling and how the Holy Spirit is moving me. So I think like an openness to finding God in like the everyday and the all things was something that I was really opened to during my service year.
And I think it'd be really cool to share kind of what you're doing during your graduate year, because I feel like that's pretty unique and is connected to not only the MVC journey, but kind of the spiritual journey. So can you just briefly talk about your program?
Yeah, so I'm in a dual degree program doing social work and theology and ministry, and spiritual formation is one of the required components of my theology and ministry degree. But I think something that I learned during MVC and that has been changing as well during graduate studies is just like every season your spirituality changes and you learn new things. So like my spiritual practices during MVC look very different than they do now because my time and my day-to-day looks very different now than it did before. One, like setting aside time. I had a lot of free time in MVC. I have a lot less free time as a graduate student. So setting aside time, like intentionally to do spiritual practices. For me right now, it looks a lot like journaling. It looks a lot like going to church with like my classmates and my colleagues and participating in that community. Now that I don't live in community, finding community in those moments is really important. It also looks a lot like, honestly, it looks a lot like finding ways to continue service similar to what I did in MVC, because that was a really big part of, I feel like, the spiritual growth was just the connection that I felt to like the actual work that I was doing was very spiritual and very faithful, and academics doesn't always feel that way. So finding ways to volunteer, finding organizations to get involved in and communities to serve has been a really important part to keep me connected to why I'm doing this and like where the call is coming from.
Thanks for talking more about your program. So if you would have to give one piece of advice or a kind of why someone should serve as a Mercy volunteer, what would you say?
Yeah, I think it's a life-changing opportunity. So I think it's definitely a beautiful thing to take advantage of. If there's a piece of advice as you're considering, I think the two things really are to be brave and to be open. To be brave in the fact that you are trying something new, you're maybe going to a new city, living with people you haven't met. So being brave and saying like, this is something that I can and want to do, but also being open. Like there's so much growth that can happen in just a single year. And so not going in with certain expectations of like, this is what I want to get out of this program, but really being open to see what can I learn from my community? What can I learn from my service site? How is God trying to speak to me through this experience, and just allowing it to shape you in maybe unexpected ways or take you down paths that you didn't think you were going to go. I did not think I was going to be coming to Boston College to get a dual master's degree, and yet here I am. So, and that is a direct result of people that I met in MVC. Like they led me down this path. So long story short, just being open to the opportunities that will arise from this experience.
Well, thank you, Amanda, for sharing your story about service and your spiritual growth. Thanks to everyone who tuned in today. We are currently accepting applications for service beginning in August, with our final application deadline being June 20th. So if you're interested, visit our website at mercyvolunteers.org/apply to get started. If you have any questions or would like to talk with a Mercy volunteer, you can reach out to us at recruitment@mercyvolunteers.org. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.